Different with Dr. Wolf, the change agent.
Thank you for joining us. This is Shrink Different with Dr. Stephen Wolf. This is your host, Johnny Blaze. How are you doing tonight, Doc?
Really good, Johnny. Really good. I always enjoy spending this time with everybody.
Well, I
get to think about what's important to me and kind of share a lot about what I've been doing for the day. It always brings up some interesting thoughts for me. So, good evening to you.
Good evening
Thank
to you
you
too,
for
sir.
joining me. Yeah. And good evening to all the other folks out there who have joined us regularly. I welcome you. I would also like to welcome you to Google a question. I mean, forget Google. I'm not too on top of the latest technology, but send us a question, or better still, call in, ideally on Skype. I think it's TFOK radio, is that right? On Skype, Johnny?
Yes, sir.
So if you could Skype in, I welcome you to ask me some questions or even to make a comment. I call the show Shrink Different because I'm a clinical psychologist, and I believe that some of my views are different from a lot of people who are psychologists or do mental health counseling and so on. I have a fair amount of diverse experience. I directed the first therapeutic drug program in the New York City Rikers Island prison system. And I had my own cell block, actually. And when I did that, I learned a lot about what it was like in prison and the issues that came up. And when I left, I said, I hope some of the men that I worked with got as much out of that program as I did. And I have a private therapy practice in West Los Angeles. And I see people from all levels of society, all occupations, many occupations that you might think of here in Southern California. I was a volunteer with the Los Angeles Sheriff Department and helped create what we called Project Turnaround. That was an acupuncture detox program on Skid Row. These men and women have been strung out on Skid Row. And we started giving them this treatment. I was responsible for the psychological services. That was an amazing experience. I'm a published author. Wrote with my co-author and friend Connie Zweig, Romancing the Shadow, a guide to soul work for a vital, authentic life. I was part of a group of people that started what has become quite, I would say, respected middle school and high school. We started that school. And let's see. I developed the Taming Your Anger program, Taming Your Anger with Emotional Intelligence. At the time, I was working with men coming straight out of prison, and I took a conventional, a regular anger management training class, and I tried teaching it for 6 months or 9 months or whatever, and I found it was not doing the trick for a lot of the people I worked with. So now, I was challenged. I either had to keep doing something that I didn't believe in, that was not working, or I didn't know how to deliver the goods, let's put it that way. Or I could say, okay, how can I help these people who are sincerely wanting to get a hold of their anger? Some of these guys were hardcore two-strikers, and they were clear. They said, Doc, we do not want to lose our temper. I do not want to lose my temper again, because if I do in the wrong place at the wrong time, here in California, there's a 3-strike rule, and if I'm convicted of a felony, I'm screwed. Going to jail for 25 years. So I took the request pretty seriously, developed the program. It's now been refined and transformed. You can go to tamingyouраnger.com, taming like taming a lion, youranger.com. There's an online with personal supervision coaching plan on there, video programs. I have taught the program to a veterans group called Vet to Vet, who teaches it at no cost in the local library to veterans and their family. And my big commitment right now is teaching it to an entire inner city school here in Los Angeles. And the goal is to change the culture of the school so that emotional intelligence begins to be what is expressed and understood in the school. And I believe that this is something that could influence modern education, that ought to influence modern education. And I'm excited about it. It's quite challenging, and I see that it's working. So that's where I was today. I was over at the school. And more and more, the kids are trusting me. And they are asking me questions and coming in with some of their experiences. And as of late, I call the show Shrink Different with Dr. Steve Wolf, the change agent. Change agent. So I'm working with integrating something I've thought of for years. I call it won't power. I read a interesting book called The Power of Habit, about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. And in there, the concept, as I said before, if I can walk away from a book I've read with something that really has helped me integrate something new, I learned something. Wow, that's great. So I did get that from this book, The Power of Habit. And what I took with me is the notion that willpower is like a muscle that can be developed. That's a really nice concept, because I speak with these kids now about willpower, and then I add in the idea of won't power. Willpower is conscious. When you say, okay, like, I want to do that. I want to get a haircut. I want to read a book. I want to stop eating that food. I want to do that exercise. I want to this. I want to that. In the moment, you may not want to. It takes willpower to stay committed to what you believe is in your best interests. That's conscious. Won't power is unconscious. Unconscious. That means it's influencing us without us realizing. It's a habit that we developed probably before we were 5 years old. Won't power. It's what stops us. So, for instance, on Friday afternoon, I went around to every kid and helped them identify something they wanted to do for themselves this weekend. Not a chore they had to do for somebody else, but something they really wanted to do for themselves. About half of them came up with things like, I want to get a haircut, I want to earn some money, so I'm going to put in a job application, I want to go to the gym, one boy wanted to learn a new language. He said he wasn't sure it could be Japanese, Chinese, or Korean. And so his homework was to pick one language and learn how to say hello, goodbye, and thank you in one language. So they had all these tasks they gave themselves. That was on Friday. And I talk about won't power is hidden. It's unconscious. So if you don't do it, then watch what stops you from doing something you really want to do. Now, for many of them, some did. I'd say a third of the kids actually did it, which is, really helps your self-respect. When you know that you've been procrastinating and that you don't want to procrastinate because you don't like the consequences, when you take a step in that direction, you feel good about yourself. So I'd say about a third of the kids did that. And then there were other reasons. Pretty much everybody else said, I forgot. I just forgot. As if I forgot means they're excused. Oh, I forgot. Okay, you're excused. You're excused from not doing something that you decided you really wanted to do for yourself. This is what I call sometimes putting yourself at the bottom of your own totem pole. That whatever you're doing, you're not respecting the fact that you really want to accomplish something for yourself. Now, it could be, really, it's just, I want to sit down and play the piano for 5 minutes. I haven't played for a while. One boy wanted to pick up another instrument. Right, he plays the piano. He said, what? The guitar. I said, okay, you got to play four measures of anything on a guitar. He said he forgot. So it's easy to not realize that forgetting is part of willpower. It's part of what keeps you from remembering that it's important for you to do whatever it is because it is. And what I would say, and this leads to the story I'm going to read in a little bit, one of my favorite stories, that there are consequences in one's life. There are consequences both in terms of learning what you would learn or accomplishing what you would accomplish by following your desire to do something for yourself. There's also the benefit of developing your willpower, which, remember, is a muscle. It's like a muscle to develop it. I love that concept. So then I said to the kids, okay, if you knew that forgetting was an unconscious voice of willpower, what could you do? One boy said you could just remind yourself and say it out loud. I said, great idea. Somebody else said you could write it down. I said, even better idea. You could write it down. And so the assignment for some of the kids who wanted to learn how to deal with forgetting was to write down at least one thing they wanted to do on a calendar between now and Friday. Just one thing. I like the do one thing approach because it's like I have one fortune cookie on my bookcase in my office. It says begin. The rest is easy. Once you take one small step, it's almost like a sleeping giant taking a yawn. It's a moment. It's one moment, but you're using that muscle now. Means the next time, it's likely to be a little bit easier to use that muscle. Again, the muscle is the muscle of willpower. And willpower is there for you to accomplish what is important to you. And I tell these kids that I can't tell them how valuable this is in their lives. As they grow into their adolescence and into their adulthood, the ability to identify what you want to learn for yourself and to put your intention behind that so that you do accomplish these things makes the difference between a meaningful, happier life than if you don't do that. And then what happened is I said, okay, for Friday, those of you that forgot, bring in something on Friday that you want to do for yourself that would make you feel good about it. I'm laughing because, I don't know if I should say, I guess I can say this. One young guy looked at me and he said, you don't want to know what I want to do. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to have a three-way with my girlfriend and this other girl. I said, oh, really? What's the next step? What do you have to do? First of all, he couldn't believe that I wouldn't judge him or do something like that. I said, it's not my job to judge you. You have to decide for yourself what your goal is. My question is to help you accomplish your goal that you think is in your best interests. And so what he realized was, he actually has to contact her and have a conversation. But it doesn't matter what it is. Because you see, these kids have to learn how to make decisions that better themselves. That's not what I'm working on with them. I'm working on helping them get the muscle to accomplish what they want to accomplish for themselves, which really has to do with emotional intelligence. So their challenge for this week is to come back with something. And if they don't, they should watch what stops them from identifying something that has value for themselves. Now, I was planning to read one of my favorite stories today. I think this is a good time to do it. Again, I welcome you to call up. The story is a little bit longer, probably take 3-4 minutes, and it teaches something that I believe to be a really valuable lesson, especially for younger folks. It's called Fatima, the Spinner, and the Tent. Once in a city in the farthest west, there lived a girl, Fatima, the daughter of a prosperous spinner. One day her father said, "Come, daughter, we're going on a journey. Perhaps you may find some handsome youth in the Middle Sea, in a good situation, whom you could take as husband." They traveled from island to island, the father doing his trading, while Fatima dreamt of the husband who might soon be hers. But one day, a storm blew up and the ship was wrecked. Fatima, half conscious, was cast up on the seashore near Alexandria. Her father was dead, and she was utterly destitute. She could only dimly remember her life, or because of the experience of the shipwreck and her exposure to the sea had exhausted her. A family of cloth makers found her. Although they were poor, they took her into their humble home and taught her their craft. She made a second life for herself this way, and within a year or two, she was happy and reconciled to her lot. She knew how to make cloth, and she did. But one day when she was on the seashore, for some reason, a band of slave traders landed, and because she was an attractive young woman, wanted her to join their other captives and took her away. She bitterly lamented her lot, but she found no sympathy for the slavers, who took her to Istanbul and sold her as a slave. Now for the second time, her life had changed. There were few buyers at the market. One was looking for someone to work in his wood yard where he made masts for ships. When he saw the dejection of the unfortunate Fatima, he bought her, and thinking that he might be able to give her a slightly better life than if she were bought by someone else. So she went into slavery. It was like 12 years a slave. He took her home, and when he arrived at the house, he found that he had lost all his money in a cargo which had been captured by pirates, and he could not afford workers. So he, Fatima, and his wife were left alone to work at the heavy labor of making masts for ships. Fatima was grateful, and she worked hard, and he gave her her freedom. Thus it was that she became comparatively happy in her third career. One day he said to her, "Fatima, I want you to go with a cargo of ship's masts to Java and sell them at a profit." She did. When the ship was off the coast of China, a typhoon wrecked it, and she found herself again cast up on the seashore of a strange land. Again, she wept bitterly, for she felt that nothing in her life was working in accordance with her expectation. When things seemed to be going well, another thing came and happened, and her hopes were destroyed. "Why is this?" she cried out for the third time, "that whenever I try to do something, it comes to grief? So many unfortunate things." There was no answer. So she picked herself up from the sand and started to walk inland. Now it so happened that nobody in China, where she had learned, had heard of Fatima or knew anything about her. But there was a legend that a certain stranger, a woman, would one day arrive, and they should be able to make a tent for the emperor. Since there was nobody in China yet who could make tents, everyone looked upon the fulfillment of this prediction with the liveliest anticipation. In order to make sure that this stranger, when she arrived, would not be missed, successive emperors of China had followed the custom of sending heralds once a year to all the towns and villages of the land, asking, "Has any foreign women landed? They must be produced at the court." When Fatima stumbled into a town by the Chinese seashore, it was such an occasion. The people explained through an interpreter that she would have to go see the emperor. "Lady," said the emperor, when Fatima was brought before, "can you make a tent?" "I think so," said Fatima. She asked for rope, but there was none to be had. So remembering her time as a spinner, she collected flax and made ropes. Then she asked for a stout cloth, but the Chinese had none of the kind which she needed. So, drawing on her experience with the weavers in Alexandria, she made stout tent cloth. Then she found that she needed tent poles, but there were none in China. So Fatima, remembering how she had been trained by the wood fashioner of Istanbul, cunningly made stout tent poles. When these were ready, she racked her brains for the memory of all the tents she had seen in her travel, and lo, a tent was made. When this wonder was revealed to the Emperor of China, he offered Fatima the fulfillment of any wish she cared to name. She chose to settle in China, where she married a handsome prince, and where she remained in happiness, surrounded by children until the end of her days. It was through these adventures that Fatima realized that what had appeared to be an unpleasant experience at the time turned out to be an essential part of the making of her ultimate happiness. That is what I refer to as Fatima the tent maker. I love that story. I love that story. Because it tells the story of what I believe life is about. So when I'm working with these kids and I'm asking them to identify something that they would like to do for themselves, I think of Fatima. I think of how when you pursue something, like when my son was really young, he was a little guy, said he wanted to be an NBA basketball player. I said, go for it. Go for it. Be the best basketball player you can be. He wanted to be a skateboarding. He wanted to get sponsored as a skateboarding guy. He never did get sponsored. Got pretty good at it. But the same message. Go for it. Be the best skateboarder that you can be. He liked to tell stories. We would write down the stories when he would tell them before he could write for himself or use the keyboard. Same thing. Because I believe that when we allow ourselves to follow our interests, we don't know where they will take us. And we don't know in what way the lessons we learned from following those interests at the time, we don't know how they may come back later on. I find the same thing with people. I find the same thing with people. You form relationships with people, maybe because you sit next to each other at the gym. Played racquetball for years. Met somebody at the gym, a guy that we would sometimes play. And then later on, what comes back is the interest in participating with my project in a whole other place where he has a group of businessmen who have a nonprofit organization and they want to support the work I do with veterans. So here's Mike. Actually, it was soccer with our kids. Here's Mike. And we spent years. He was an assistant coach for me. And maybe 10 years later, I bump into him at a bank and we reconnect. And so the fact that we worked with each other as co-coaches 10 years earlier, that was a stepping stone in the history that we have with each other. Neither of us had any idea of anything like that happening in the future. But what I've seen is life works like that. It's a good reason not to burn bridges. But it's more than not burning bridges. It's learning how to work with people. It's doing different things. Because when somebody has the experience of spending time with you and they learn to get to know you, and if you're working together, they get to see your strengths and your weaknesses, and they see what it's like to be dealing with your personality and you with theirs. So, to me, Fatima, the tent maker, has become shorthand with those that know the story. When somebody says, I got a job doing this, but I would never have realized that, for instance, when I worked mixing colors at a paint plant that made paints, I would have no idea how that would contribute to my development. Really, teaching different kinds of camera work and digital art in a college later on. I had no idea. He spent a couple of years mixing paints, making very precise colors. And so he trained his eye in colors, not realizing where it would come in down the road. So, going back to the idea that willpower is a muscle, I try to exercise that muscle as much as I can by following what are my inclinations, my intuitions, and so on. Because I believe that they guide me, and when I do, good things happen. I meet interesting people, I learn things. It's an internal guidance system. The trick is catching the won't power. It can be very sneaky. Again, it's unconscious. I tell these kids, by the way, call in with a comment or a question. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree with me. I talk to these kids about, when I say unconscious, the question is, okay, what does that mean? I tell them for a brief moment about Sigmund Freud. I say, anybody know who Sigmund Freud is? Not too often do any of these kids know who Sigmund Freud is. I said, I told them he was a famous cocaine addict, their ears would pop open, which he was. I say he's the father of modern psychology. I'm a psychologist, it's what I do. There's many different ideas and theories about psychology, but one thing is pretty much agreed upon by all theories of psychology, and that is that there is an unconscious, that there is a place where memories are stored, but we don't remember them. And so I said, how many of you have 5 memories from before you were 5 years old? 1 or 2 kids? Raise their hands. How many of you have 2 or 3 memories? A couple more kids, raise your hands. Anybody have more than 5 memories? Maybe 1 kid raises. This is probably altogether in the day. This could be 100 kids, because I do it a bunch of times. And I said, okay, so if you were 5 years old, that means you were alive for about 1,800 days. You had 1,800 days of experience, and you can barely remember 5 moments. But guess what? If you were hypnotized, and the hypnotist said, okay, I want you to go back and revisit and tell me about your 5th birthday party. And you were hypnotized now, and I would have you hypnotized, and you would go back to your 5th birthday party. You would remember what you were wearing. You could remember the birthday cake. You could remember what presents you got, because it's stored in your memory bank, in your unconscious. We react oftentimes in the present based on the history of what happened to us in the past. That is a common principle for what's referred to as depth theories of psychology. And many different forms of therapy are attempting to help you clarify things from the past that you're still reacting to in the present. And in the book, you can go to my website, tamingyouраnger.com. There's a book called EQ 101. EQ stands for Emotional Intelligence. Building Blocks of Emotional Intelligence. I'd encourage you to go check it out. This is good stuff. It's a workbook. You can develop your emotional intelligence. You can get emotionally smarter. And so, by using the understanding that there is an emotional memory. See, the emotional brain has memory. We react to things in the present based on emotional experience in the past. Powerful concept. So that's understood by just about all forms, all schools of psychology. And that was Sigmund Freud's contribution. And that's where the notion of the unconscious comes from. Think of it as a file cabinet where you stored all that stuff. We store all of that stuff, all those experiences that we had in what I affectionately refer to as the loony bin where you were raised. No offense, it's not personal. We're all raised in a loony bin of some kind or another. And that's where we learn certain ways of being. That's where our personality develops. Just the way you learn the language of your birth family. You learn the emotional language of your birth family. So, in terms of won't power, it's unconscious. Attitudes, feelings, thought, interpretations, behavior. This is all stuff that we learn. And I tell these kids, I say, look, because we talk about habit. And I tell them, you already have a habit of how to deal with anger. You automatically react when you feel anger. You can't help. It's part of the building blocks. You can't help feeling anger when you feel anger because it comes from your emotional brain. And your emotional brain produces impulses the way your reptilian brain produces heartbeats. You can't help it. You can't help having a heartbeat. You can't not have a heartbeat. Boom, 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 boom. It's happening. You can't help it. But you can't help having an emotion either. Boom, boom, boom. Emotion, impulse, produced by your emotional brain. Now, how to discharge that, how to express that, the experience of that. All of that we have to learn just the way we have to learn language to communicate. And so we all develop habits as kids to deal with anger. And so, once you listen to my explanation, I tell them, look, okay, you got a habit. All of these kids, not all, most of these kids are in this continuation high school because of some behavior problem. Somebody else said, you got a problem. And you can't stay here anymore because of the way you're dealing with your emotions. They may not have used that language. May not have been as respectful. Hopefully it was. So I say, you have a habit. You figured out how to deal with anger. Okay. Now, do you want to let the habit that you learned before you were 5 years old continue to have so much influence in your life? Or not? It's up to you. See, now that you know you have an option. Do you want to change the behavior or not? Because it ain't going to change by itself. You need the willpower. And you need the method. And you need the notion that you can learn to do that. If you do it, you need to know, I could learn that. I can assure you, you can learn it. As a matter of fact, I give people a money-back guarantee if they do my program at tamingyouраnger.com. If you do the program, as I tell you to do, you will change your behavior, or you'll get your money. Not all of it. You get 2/3 of your money back. It costs $395 for a individual coaching online video program. So these kids are offered the opportunity, and God bless them. Some of them are using it every week, and they're learning to change their behavior. We hope to be able to teach the parents, because if your parents are using the same understanding that you're getting at school in terms of understanding emotion, understanding anger, so on, now the likelihood of really developing a habit, a new habit, is greatly increased. Because you see, to develop the new habit, there's different stages of this program. One is that you understand the basic tools of the program. You know what it's like, the ABCs. The second, which is where these kids are at, is you use it once or twice. You use the particular breathing program once or twice, and you say it works. Wow, I changed my behavior. They always feel good about it. But the third stage is, you see, then you say to yourself, okay, I know it works. Do I want to develop a new habit? Do I really want to develop a new habit? Because that takes practice. That's another order of business. And that's where these kids are up to. And we'll see what happens with it. So, the idea of Fatima. The idea that we can learn. Now, Fatima, she had a lot of bad stuff happen to her. Her life was turned upside down 3-4 times. And the ending of the story is the key. They call these teaching stories. This is from a book called Tales of the Sufi, S-U-F-I, Dervishes, by Idris Shah. And the last sentence is, it was through her adventures that Fatima realized that what had appeared to be an unpleasant experience at the time, I would say that was an unpleasant experience at the time, turned out to be an essential part of the making of her ultimate happiness. Wow. How to learn from the experiences. Trusting that we carry the learning with us. I like to think of it as our backpack. That we have this like backpack that we take with us through life, which is the accumulation of knowledge, things that we've learned. I'm sad to say that many people stop learning. They stop learning at too early an age. They don't realize that there's more to learn. They just don't realize it. They think that they know what they need to know, and that's that. Stifling. Causes people to get stuck. And it's difficult times out there. All political things that we're hearing about, all about economic equality and the difference between the 1% and the 99%. It's really the 1/10 of 1% and the 99.9% if you get down to it. That the difference there is like staggering and growing. And so it's a real challenge. How do you choreograph? Let's say you're a young person. I'd like to know the demographics of the show, actually. I don't know who's listening. You know we have hundreds of listeners. Let us know a little about you. What are the demographics? I can kind of gear my talking more to you. But if you're a young person, mid-20s, early 30s, on a path, not on a path, working in a job you like, working in a job you don't like, not working in a job, how do you choreograph this? How do you get value out of it? How do you want to kind of conduct yourself as you move through your life? because you will continue to move through your life. It's a series of moments. Life is a continuing series of unfolding moments. I read a haiku one recently. It was, the future never comes. The past never seems to be here. This must be the present. That's off a syllable, but close enough. So it's understanding that what we have to work with is the moment-to-moment experience. But really, at the same time, there's a flow and continuity in our lives. What happened in our past influences our experience of the present. What happens in the present influences what will occur in the present and the future. It's very interesting when you start to think about it that way. Sometimes I think about life in the same way that physicists talk about light. Light can be measured as both a particle and as a wave. It's a particle, like a subatomic atomic particle. It's also a wave. And depending upon how you look at it, there's different mathematical computations. You might want to use one definition on this occasion, and you want to use the other definition in that occasion, and you really want to understand light. You need both definitions. I see life like that also, because life as a particle is there's always the moment to 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 moment experience of now. This is what all of the Hindu, Buddhist, Kabbalistic mystics talk about. Always the now. Now, at the same time, there is a string of nows. Think of them as pearls on a string. There's the history of those moment to moment to moment, like we had a couple of moments ago. And then there's the unfolding of the moment to moment to moment. And so when you look at the pattern of the past, it can really help you decide how to deal with the present in an attempt to see how you can maybe influence your own future. I heard someone define luck one time as preparation for the unexpected. That luck somehow had to do with an internal having been prepared for the unexpected. And then you get to take an opportunity for the luck gives you the opportunity to enjoy what comes to you in life. But that there's an active participation in luck. For instance, if you've studied a language and you meet somebody at the theater, at the movie theater, and they ask you a question in that language, now you can answer them, and maybe a good thing comes out of it. You could say, oh, how lucky that that person asked you. But you could also say, if you didn't study that language, it never would have happened. So, I think we're about at our time for today. I would like to come to a close with change time, unless somebody's got a comment or a question. In change time, I try to help you in the same way that I work with the kids. Be nice to hear from those of you that have been using my suggestions. So what I'd say is, if, like I suggested last week, you have something in mind that you'd like to do for yourself, something you've been procrastinating on, something that would have meaning to you, think about it right now. If you didn't prepare, think about it anyway. What have you been procrastinating about that you would really like to do for yourself? Could be for fun, it could be for career, it could be creativity, could be making a phone call to somebody you haven't spoken to for a while, could be anything. That you could be a three-way with your girlfriend, 17 years old. It could be whatever. Hope I'm not offending anybody, but that's what he said. pick something that you would like to do for yourself between now and next Monday. And then, if I asked you what is one small step that you can take in that direction, the smallest step, it might be a telephone call, it might be looking something up on the internet, it might be like with this boy who wanted to learn a lesson, pick the language and learn hello, goodbye, and thank you. Very simple. Maybe you want to go get a haircut. Maybe you want to fill out some kind of application for something. Maybe you want to start a book. If you want to start a book, read one page. Just open it up and read one page or more. If you want to fill out an application, get the application, pull it up on your computer, and print it out. And just put in your name. Just start. Just do one thing on that application. If you want to make a phone call, make the phone call. That's okay. Now, once you identify, I suggest you, if you write it down, it'll be more powerful for you. Remember, won't power is unconscious. Once you write it down, if you don't do it, identify what stops you from doing what you say you really want to do for yourself. That's won't power. And Fatima was successful because won't power of loss and isolation and loneliness and disaster, and God knows what would happen if any one of us went through those experiences. Won't power didn't stop her from learning from what was happening around her. That's the story. So get to know the voice of won't power that stops you. So for now, I'm glad to have been able to share this time with you. If you enjoyed what you heard, please let us know. Check out tamingyouраnger.com, the website. You can learn some of the basic methods for $2 or $5 or $10. Very inexpensive. And all the best for a good week. I'll see you next Monday. Bye-bye.
TFOK Radio, the station that rocks the TFOK nation.